Hi, this is Darren Gosen, and I'm going to show you today how to demonstrate training the chatbot from the service catalog. What I'm using here is the V2 instance of the 1808 chatbot that's available within the BDC. It's important to make sure that you're using the V2 because a fix was applied to this use case. So one use case that the chatbot hasn't been trained for is around being able to order a new iPhone. And there is a service within our demo environment for that. So as you go through your demonstration, you'll go through different use cases, but when you get to the point where you want to be able to demonstrate training the chatbot, this is a good use case to use. So if you ask the chatbot, how do I order a new iPhone? What it's going to do is it's going to do a search of knowledge base to try to find answers. You can see it returns a couple issues related to iPhone, but nothing specifically around ordering a new iPhone. Something important to remember is that this is the way in which you want to ask the chatbot, at least for our demo environment. How to will trigger the search, and you want to be specific around iPhone because it'll find some content around the iPhone. So the talk track here is that the chatbot found some knowledge, but it's not directly what is going to help the users. So we can use what's in our service catalog to train the chatbot to be more prescriptive about questions it asks and actually submit a request that will fulfill the issue or fulfill the resolution for the user. So you log in for that environment into the digital workplace catalog, go into services, and search for iPhone. Now you'll see this order iPhone service. Double clicking it will bring up this pane on the right hand side. An important thing here is if it's approved, you want to make sure that you switch to the published version. You can only enable the chatbot in the published version. And what that will do is bring up the wizard in which you can go through the process. So I'll select the bot as the English bot, and it'll bring up whatever your conversation workspace that you have configured for your environment. Clicking next will show that we have the correct service, and then here we can add in some examples so that it can train the natural language processing. So I'll say here I need to order, we'll just need to order a new iPhone. That should be sufficient. We'll click next. Now, these are going to relate to the questions that the chatbot asks. So our chatbot at the moment does not support attachments, so we'll deselect that. When I select on edit, it'll show here what the question relates to and the values that the question is expecting. So this is the model, and these are the different values that the organization supports. This is the carrier and the different carriers, so we want to keep those. This is additional instructions, so we're going to deselect that because we don't need to ask for additional instructions. It's not a required field in the service. And then the last one is available colors. So one thing to note is we are making enhancements to this in the 1811 release. In fact, I typically don't go through this whole process with a customer. I do it beforehand, and I will show you where I get to. So when we get to the dialogue, here's where you have the ability to modify the questions. So I would typically say, please select the model of iPhone that you want. You can say, please select the carrier, that's fine, and select from the available colors. Now, the other important thing here to do is select the options, and this will show the questions with the answers as buttons. So I usually select them, click on edit just to make sure that the options are what I'm expecting. That's correct. And then finally, this is correct. And then click next. Now this is typically where I've gone through the first 4 steps in the process, and this is typically where I have for a demo it waiting. So what I do is we'll go in when I bring up the service catalog, I can explain that you can enable in chatbot, and instead of clicking that, I'll click to this ready set page here. And you just have to make sure that it doesn't time out while you're waiting for this to happen. And the talk track here is just to talk about how we're taking the information from the service catalog, the expected answers that are in the questions, as data in which to train the chatbot. And we're automatically generating the integration between our chatbot and the digital workplace catalog so that these requests can be submitted. So when you click next, we can quickly click on the import, and the talk track here is, because this takes about a minute for the training to actually happen, is that what's happening is that we've taken all of this configuration and data from the service catalog and have now pushed it through our cognitive microservice on Innovation Suite into IBM Watson Assistant. And what this has done is actually kicked off a training within IBM Watson Assistant to take this new data and configuration. It's updated the data model that Watson Assistant uses for training, and it's also added in a conversation that Watson Assistant can use to converse with the user around an iPhone and collect information from the user. And not only does it take the 3 questions that we submitted, but it builds a full conversation around it. So you'll see it creates a response when the action is taken, it creates a confirmation message, etc. It also adds in a check for entitlements to make sure that the user that's asked about an iPhone is entitled to actually request this service. So all of this is kind of done behind the scenes as we've imported. Now the next step is to go back to the interface, the chatbot interface, and ask the chatbot again. So you can use the same language. You don't want to refresh it because you want the users to see that. You don't need to refresh it, that it's an automated thing. So I can say, how do I order a new iPhone? So you can ask the same question. You can ask something similar. But asking the same question shows that without refreshing it and asking the same thing after I've gone through that process, the end user gets a much different experience. So now I can select the model. It's going to ask me what my carrier is, and it's going to give me options of the colors that are supported within the organization. It will submit a request once I've confirmed that that's correct. I'll say yes. And you'll see here through the automated integration into Digital Workplace, it's created a request. That request ID has a URL in which I can click, which will open up within Digital Workplace. So that shows a totally different experience than getting a limited knowledge search back. Now, in terms of demoing this is something that you'll want to do with customer A and then again with customer B. There's another step that needs to be done. Now, this isn't something that we typically we would show the customer, but the next time that you want to demo it, you need to make sure that this training has been removed. So what you do is you go into your service of Watson Assistant. You'll see it's now called Skills. Before it was called Workplaces, but you essentially find the skill. You'll notice the skill we were using is the Hong Kong Exchange. What you need to do is you need to delete the configuration that was added by that wizard so you can do it again. So there are 3 areas: intent, entities, and dialogue. In the intent that was created is this one called order iPhone, so we can select that and delete. The entities are carrier, model, and available colors. Those are the 3. You can see the values, so we'll select all 3 of those and delete them. And then finally, dialogue. So you go in and find a dialogue around that. Sometimes you need to just refresh for the dialogue to show up. Find the dialogue that was created. And it's always named the name of the service. So BMC order iPhone. Select that, click delete, and yes, delete it. So those have all been deleted. Now when I go back to the chatbot, I'll ask it again, how do I order an iPhone? and you see it goes back to the search rather than asking you which type of iPhone. So that's how you can now repeat the process. Of course, you can go into the service catalog and find other services that you may want to use this for. The key is to keep it to fairly simple services and to make sure that before you do it, you check the chatbot to see what the initial response is, and to make sure that through your talk track the initial response isn't the best one or the chatbot can't find anything, and then after the wizard it creates the service request.